whenever a remake is announced, I tend to feel conflicted. If it's a game I really love, I'll be excited for sure, but I'll also be a bit concerned. I worry that it's not going to honor the memory of the game that I have, right? In the process of translating the game into the modern era, in making a new version of this game, a lot of things are often lost. And if the game was a 10 out of 10 absolute masterpiece in my eyes, and I experienced it at a young age, I often look at it and I go, well, what is there to add to this? Why not just keep the original, the nostalgia, and all of this stuff as is? At the same time, it's an invitation to experience this game again. And that is fantastic. That is exciting. That is wonderful. There's this nostalgia that just absolutely kicks in and goes, don't you want to experience this again? That would be the coolest thing ever. And what are they going to do with it? What interesting stuff do they have to add? There's so much new technology. It could be so beautiful. It could be so fantastic. It could be so exciting. And that pulls me in. But I do think that it's important to pick the right games to remake. And I don't love remaking 10 out of 10 games. I understand why they do it, right? It's very profitable to remake a game that was extremely successful, but I have a very weird stance here. And maybe it's just like a game design stance. I think that it would be very cool to remake games that are deeply flawed but still pretty popular. I think that if you remake a game that has clear, deep flaws and fix those flaws, you could have a absolute smash success. But maybe I'm just missing out on something from the marketing perspective. Who knows? Anyway, I'm Chris, and this is Game Develop Repeat. And today we're talking about why I think it's time to remake Final Fantasy VIII. And we'll talk about remaking stuff in general along the way, as well as some development lessons. There is so much that I love about Final Fantasy VIII and so much that I absolutely despise. It is about to get every backhanded compliment in the book. Final Fantasy VIII is a pile of diamonds mixed in with a pile of manure. Every bit of this game is brilliant and caked in crap. It is such a weird title, and I think that's why it's so ready for a remake. There's so many things that you can just improve in this game. And I say that like it's easy. Obviously, it's not easy. A remake is an extremely difficult thing, but this game is just ready for it. There's so much you could do with it. So let me just talk about it a bit, all right? Final Fantasy VIII has a story that starts out phenomenally and quickly falls apart for me. I can't stand the way this story ends. I can't stand the middle of the story, the beginning of the story. I love it. The characters are all interesting. Squall, your main character, your protagonist, he's the silent kind of guy. He's all like, oh, whatever, I don't care, so on and so on. He's the self-insert protagonist where he doesn't say much, so you can just pretend that you're him, and then he's kind of angsty as the story goes on, and you get to know him a little bit more. And then you got Zell, who I always liked. I don't know why. He's punching the air all the time. He's got some kind of weird anger problem. He's kind of annoying. He's got a friggin' Mike Tyson face tattoo. I don't know what's going on with that. You got Cypher, who's like villainous, whiny brat guy. He's so weird. He's such a weird character. He's like a whiny guy who gets power. Not like whiny. He's like kind of oddly spoiled. It's hard to characterize it, but he's kind of got a deep character going on there. He's got some kind of mommy issue thing going on. But I like him, you know. Sophie is very cheerful. You got all these good characters is what I'm getting at, you know. And then they're all interacting, they're all getting to know each other, they're all exploring this world together a little bit, they're having these experiences, they're bonding, they're growing, you're getting to know what's going on with them. And then there's a moment in the story where it kind of ruins that for me. And I'm not gonna spoil this, but there's a moment in the story where they make me not care about the characters anymore. They make me go, oh, so all the time that we all just spent together is like not as important as I thought it was. Really? It ruined the game for me as a kid. It really, I don't know what it was. It hit really hard where I went, oh, now I don't care. That's annoying, you know? I just wasn't into it. So I'll get off of that so that I don't spoil anything. Let's talk about combat, gameplay, game design. The combat is sort of interesting. You've got limit breaks that have all these cool inputs. That's fascinating. You've got guardian forces that kind of act as a shield for you while they're summoning. That's very interesting as well. They have their own health bar. Cool. You have to have custom items to like heal them and stuff. And they have their own abilities and stuff. We'll get into that a little bit, but they have their summon things that they cast. And then you've got spells, you've got a draw system, you've got things like mug and steal and attack and whatever, right? Okay, cool. Pretty straightforward. You've got a little bit of time-sensitive attack stuff. You can make your gun blade do extra damage if you hit a button at the right time. It's not really used that much throughout the game, if we're being honest with each other. The limit breaks are where the excitement comes in terms of like reactive inputs, and then just like, ATB system, all that stuff. Classic JRPG, active time battle, blah, 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 blah. Now, level ups and draw system and the junction system, that's really like the big thing in this game that can be easily improved. You can just take the junction system and just get rid of it and the game is already better. You can just I'm saying rip out the foundation from the game and it's better. Yeah, okay, maybe it's not that easy, but there's something with the junction system. It is so over-engineered. For those of you who are not familiar, you draw magic from enemies, right? You draw up to 100 stacks of a particular type of magic from your enemies, and then you can equip it, you can junction it to your character, and then your character will be stronger in a specific way. So you can junction fire to your hit points or water to your magic. You can junction these things to specific stats, and it will improve those stats. Very cool. Terrible mechanic. Absolutely awful. In terms of actually playing the game, it is so bad. You have like 8 or 10 stats you can junction things to, maybe even more with like immunities to different elements and stuff. And you have to unlock these junctions through training your guardian forces. It's cool. It's all very cool, but it's so broken and it's so complicated to learn the first time. It is not good. It's not good, but I like it. It is not good. The draw system is the main reason why it falters. So let's say we keep the junction system, we explain it better, we simplify it a little bit, and then boom, we're good to go. Now the draw system needs to be fixed. The draw system is not that big of a thing to fix. You just have to make it so that you're not like drawing 100 of every magic from every enemy, right? You have to make it so that it's not this thing where you're constantly feeling like you have to have 100 of every type of magic so that you have junction options. Because then what can happen is you have 100 magic and then you don't want to use the magic at all in case you want to junction it to something. So you can only use your weakest magic in combat, which sucks, right? You're only using magic to like get rid of it. It's not good. It's like, why would I use this magic when I can just use this guardian force? So basically the way you end up playing the game is you just start attacking things physically and making sure that you have really good physical attack junction, rarely using magic, using your guardian forces often and using other skills often, but like you basically don't get to use magic. And anytime you encounter a new spell, you then just draw from the enemy as long as you possibly can to get to 100 on each character, which resulted in me laying down in my bed as a kid, holding X and just like buzzing on a mouthpiece. Like I was like practicing music while playing this game, waiting for it to make the sound effect that told me that I couldn't draw any more magic from an opponent. It's awful. It's horrible. And it's very interesting. Now, let me give you an idea for how this could be better. Recently, Square Enix has been exploring these other ideas. They've been exploring action-based gameplay. And by the way, part of what inspired this episode is I played Final Fantasy 16's demo and I went, "Oh my god, they might have it. They might be pulling this off right now." I played the Final Fantasy 16 demo and I was like, "This seems like a good game." It's an action game. It's totally different from the other Final Fantasy games, but to be very honest with you guys, I have had no faith in Square Enix for a while now. I played Final Fantasy 13, didn't really like it. 13-2, didn't really like it. 13 Lightning Returns, I liked the combat system. It was nice, cool, great. 14, mediocre at best. Don't like 14. Not my kind of game. I played to like level 60, and then I got to the point where it was like, oh, now you do all this stuff to unlock the next element of the story. And I was like, I'm done with this. It shouldn't take me like 80 hours to get to the supposedly good part of the game that everybody's been talking about. But whatever, it's an MMO. 15 felt completely incomplete to me. Felt like an unfinished game, very upsetting. First half of the game, amazing. Rest of the game, did not care for it, did not like it. The 16 demo made me go, ooh, I'm kind of having some faith in you guys. Maybe you're able to pull something off. Maybe you're doing a good job. And I've been hearing really good things about the 7 remake and part 2 of the 7 remake. And I'm like, okay, maybe we're starting to get there. Maybe something cool is happening, right? So now I'm like, maybe they can do this. Maybe they've actually got this. Maybe they can really pull this off. Final Fantasy VIII's draw system, imagine that incorporated into action combat. Get rid of this thing where you're drawing all this magic and stacking. Just remove that. Just use the idea of the draw system. Draw something from an enemy, use it reactively in combat, right? You draw it, maybe you hold it, it gives you a little bit of extra power. You can hit another button to use the ability on the opponent or as a defensive tool or what have you, right? And you can limit the number of things that you're drawing, so on and so on. This is just a single pitch for how to redesign this. But the point is, you have so much to play with in this world. There is so much stuff in Final Fantasy VIII that has been underutilized. There are so many diamonds covered in manure, and you just got to wash the manure off. Look at the diamond from some different angles and go, ooh, how can I set this into a ring? How can I make this look real nice? How can I cut this up? How can I make something excellent out of this abandoned world? Final Fantasy VIII is not a sacred title. I think this is essential. Final Fantasy VIII is not like a lot of the other Final Fantasies. Some people hold Final Fantasy X in the highest regard. Some people hold Final Fantasy VII in the highest regard, and yet they're making some bold moves in remaking 7. They can absolutely remake Final Fantasy VIII without having to treat it as a sacred property. I think they can almost do whatever they want with a Final Fantasy VIII remake. I really do. I feel like they could make it a full-on single-character action RPG, and I don't think people would revolt. I really don't. I don't think that's necessarily the angle, but I do think a large action element in the game would be fantastic, because the gunblade that Squall uses is like, hello, give me the action RPG. Absolutely. All of the whole aesthetic of the world is like, give me action. Give me an action RPG, right? And you could mix it. You could do a mixed turn-based action thing. It's fine. But it's not a sacred game. You can change the story. You can change the draw system. You can change all of these things, and the backlash is not going to be that crazy. I don't think. Maybe I'm completely off base here, but I don't think that the popular consciousness is like, we have to protect Final Fantasy VIII. It's such a core game in the series. Its identity is so important. No, I feel like you can take it and you can just play with it and you can do whatever you want with the remake. This is the kind of game I want to see remade. I don't want to see a remake of a sacred work of art that's been idolized by absolutely everybody. I want to see a remake of a game that everybody looks at and goes, yeah, I mean, it's good, but Jesus, there are some real issues here, you know? And Final Fantasy VIII is like, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's a good game. It's horrible, too. It's so deeply flawed. There's so much room for improvement. And they're getting good at this action RPG thing, and I think that fits really well for Final Fantasy VIII. And look, here's the other element of this. And I hate to bring this up, but Final Fantasy's not really leaning in that hard on the turn-based thing these days, right? That was their old thing. I don't need them to lean in hard on the turn-based thing anymore. I've got Yakuza Like a Dragon. They're doing a great job with turn-based combat. I got Dragon Quest XI. They're crushing it. They're giving me all the things I've ever wanted. There's this new game, what is it, Expedition 33, that's been advertised that looks exactly like the kind of thing I want to do. I'm not that upset if Square Enix goes towards an action angle. Like when I played the Final Fantasy 16 demo, I went, "Oh, this is nice. They're doing something different. It feels like this is what they've been wanting to do." I'm not mad if they exit the turn-based space a little bit and keep pushing into this action thing. I think a long time ago I would have been, but other games are filling that niche really well. They're doing a very good job of it. So I'm not that upset if there's one less game in the niche because other people are exploring it, and it seems like the Final Fantasy team is exploring other stuff right now and doing a really good job with it. So what better way to explore it than to take an old idea that was never really quite landing and iterate with that idea and find a new design for this incredibly cool world with this strange technology, with these interesting characters that opens, by the way, with an awesome freaking sword fight. An action-packed sword fight is like the opening cinematic for Final Fantasy VIII. What better game to further explore this slightly more action-packed angle that you're doing, whether it's a very turn-based action angle or a Final Fantasy 16 style kind of single-player action, like almost Witcher 3-esque kind of action RPG angle. Anyway, that's my Final Fantasy VIII rant. Now let's talk about some development ideas related to this. Here's a weird takeaway from this conversation. Iteration is really important. I think it's really important to test your ideas over and over and over and find a really good implementation, right? And I think that doing remakes is kind of like a very late version of iteration. It's really interesting. It's like, oh, this game, we tested it at market and people loved it, so now we're going to do more with it. We're going to do another iteration of it. Now, I happen to have a weird and specific opinion, which is that if it was very, very successful, maybe you should do an iteration of something that was a little less successful so that you have more room for growth and like improve public opinion. But that might not be the most financially beneficial thing. I'm not sure. Maybe in the long run it is. Maybe it isn't. I couldn't say. I've never run a giant company like that. I'm not really in on that. But I do think that there's something interesting to be said about this idea of iterating on a good idea. That's kind of what these companies are doing when they do remakes. But sometimes you want to iterate on a bad idea. I'm not saying invest completely, but sometimes you have an idea that you can tell there's something good in there, and you just want to try different angles over and over. Maybe that's something you do privately more than publicly, but once you find a good angle, then you're ready to make a cool product, right? Then you're ready to make a cool game. And I think, not to just continue the sales pitch, but I think that it's time to do another version of Final Fantasy VIII. It's time for another iteration. Look, man, I just want a remake of this game, if we're being completely honest. It's one of the few games that I want a remake of, oddly enough. Do I want one of Legend of Dragoon? Probably not, honestly. I don't think there's a team that I would trust to do that, although it would be cool. It would be interesting. But I'm not as excited about that, just because it's such a, it's kind of a lightning in a bottle one for me. I don't know. Okay, so what else? What else can we learn from this? I'm a big fan of improvement where you know you can improve. Looking around and going, oh, here's the thing that I know I can make better. Here's another thing I know I can make better. Yes, there are absolutely times where we strive and we go, how much better can I get? I've already hit this barrier. Can I push past it? Can I make something even better? Can I strive to do something even more incredible? Which is something that I appreciate about remaking a masterpiece, looking at something that's absolutely phenomenal and going, can I make it even better? That's impressive. Now, I think a lot of the times we look at an absolute masterpiece and go, oh, what if I can re-release it on a different platform? That doesn't interest me, right? This thing where we make a live-action version of something that was already extremely successful as an anime, not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think sometimes just remaking a thing for a different medium is fine, but I get much more inspired by remaking a thing and trying to improve it, going, okay, we have modern tools now, what can we do with this? Okay, we've learned so much, how much further can we push it? But early on in the learning process, maybe we don't try to fix a masterpiece. Maybe we look at where we know we can improve and go, okay, how much better can I make this? How much better can I make that? How much further can I go in all these categories where I see clear deficiencies? In fact, I think the better you get at something, the more obvious some deficiencies are, and the more places you have to choose some improvement, right? So I think maybe improving where you can might be applicable even when you're working on an absolute masterpiece, because maybe you look at something that was once a masterpiece and you go, yeah, but we can improve it here, here, and here. If you just know so much about the craft or you have so many strong opinions, I suppose it could be good, it could be bad. I'm not really sure on that one. I don't think I'm far enough along in my game development kind of adventure here to know for sure. I was about to call it a game development journey, but then it sounded like a reality TV show, and I resist the word journey because I think I watched too much The Bachelor at one point in my life, and they call everything a journey in that freaking show, I think, unless I'm mixing it up with other reality TV show. Whoops. But yeah, I don't think trying to beat a masterpiece is always the best move. I think sometimes we improve the things that we're not crushing. And I think, here's an indie game dev lesson. There's this thing that happens that's very interesting. A successful game comes out, and a bunch of other games come out and imitate it and try to do the same idea. Like the most recent one that I can think of like a whole industry shaker kind of thing would be Stardew Valley. This also happened with platformers whenever Braid came out, puzzle platformers, right? There's something where a significant kind of game-changing title will come out, something that really shakes the market, and then everybody will imitate it. And I think if you're doing that, you need to add something. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. Vampire Survivors did this too. I'm not saying don't imitate, but I am saying keep in mind what you're doing. If you're trying to beat a masterpiece, you have to actually beat the masterpiece. Now, if you're trying to do a different spin on it, great. But if you're doing straight competition, if you're going, this game was so successful and absolutely everybody loved it, I'm going to do the exact same thing, only better, you need to really be aware of what you're doing. And I'm a huge fan of taking an idea like that and doing your own spin on it. And I do think that's kind of how genres are born, although that's also how complete and total flooding of the market is born. And that's why making a platformer is not the greatest idea for making a profit, right? Like, it's a very, very flooded genre. But, there's nothing wrong with exploring ideas within a genre that you're excited about. But I do think it's important to be attentive to why you're exploring it. If you're doing it just because you absolutely love this game and you're going, I want to make something just like that, keep in mind that it might not be marketable unless you're doing something very different. I don't know how I got there from this whole remake conversation, but I think it makes some sense, right? Like, you don't want to just make if you're not aware of what you're doing, you may just end up making a slightly worse version of the same thing with less, public acknowledgement. And then a couple people will buy it because they're looking for more of the same, and that's fine. But, not even from a perspective of sales, too. Like, if you finish your game and then at the end of it, you prefer playing the game that you were kind of imitating, then, well, I guess you'll learn something from it at least. So that's always good, right? I think that's all I have to say about the development side of this today. I think this is a bit of a strange episode because I'm mostly promoting the idea that this game should be remade and arguing about that. But on the development side, I guess, a little bit of iteration. Oh, one final point. Final Fantasy always tries something new. This is something I learned from reading a Never Knows Best, watching a Never Knows Best video about Final Fantasy, where he played like every single Final Fantasy game, or every main line, and he talked about how they're always trying something new, so nobody's ever really like fully satisfied, and it always feels like they could have done more with it, whatever. But Final Fantasy always tries something new, which is always interesting to me. There's always a little bit of a different angle with every new game that they release. And I find it really inspiring that there's always some level of iteration in the design and always some level of risk taking for such a major project, for such a large company to always be taking some amount of risk whenever they do a new iteration of their main line. I like that a lot. And I find that to be somewhat inspiring on an indie dev level. Like, yeah, we can try out new things. Like, if a company that big can still keep trying new things and like communicating across their entire team in order to establish this new gameplay mechanic, new idea, when they could just like, look, how many opportunities have they had to grab an idea and just dig completely into it and just keep going down this one particular rabbit hole? But they keep shifting it. They keep changing. They keep doing new stuff. That's interesting. That's kind of inspiring. That's kind of cool. And I like that. And that's the last little bit that I have to say there. Let's get some weekly ideas flowing. Let's go ahead and get you thinking about game development for the rest of the week. All right. 2 questions to get you thinking this week. The first one is, what game would you like to see remade? I've already answered that this time, Final Fantasy VIII. But are there any games that you would like to see remade, and why? Maybe it's a technical reason, maybe it's a graphical reason, maybe you just want to re-experience it. But what are your thought processes behind that? The next question is, do you know any games that are kind of like Final Fantasy VIII as I described it for you? Like, do you know any games that are a diamond caked in manure? Do you know anything that is like, this game is so perfect and so deeply flawed? Because I think we can learn a lot about our own preferences by looking at that. By the way, none of this was an objective statement. I'm not saying that Final Fantasy VIII is objectively this way. This is all how I perceive it. I think there's a lot of validity to my opinion, but I understand it if somebody else doesn't see the bad sides of it that I see, because they may have had a completely different experience with the game at a different time in their life, and they may play games differently than I do. With that in mind, do you have a game that you had this experience with? Because maybe that can teach you a lot about your preferences and then what kind of games you want to design, what kind of things you want to create, assuming that that is your interest. And then the tip, the supposed tip, I always feel weird calling it a tip, but the idea for this week is just to keep exploring and keep experimenting. I think it's kind of a simple tip, right? It's pretty straightforward, but it's important to keep exploring and then experimenting with the new ideas that we discover through that exploration. It's easy to get stuck in on the ideas that we've been working on and focusing completely on mastery of specific ideas. But why not explore some new stuff? Because maybe the new ideas will lead us towards mastery in the things that we're so desperately trying to get better and better and better at, right? You're not going to get better by just staring at the same thing all day, every day. Sometimes you got to take in some new ideas and experiment with them, and that'll really help you move forward. And with that, that is the end of this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining me. We've got a Twitch stream, we've got a Discord, and then we've got this podcast, of course. If you want to join the Discord, there's a link in the description. If you want to watch the Twitch stream, it's twitch.tv/AnxiousBuddhaGames, Anxious Buddha Games on Twitch. And there's a link for that too, I think. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern. There you go. That's the pitch. I try to keep it quick. That's everything. Get out there, make some stuff, and have fun with it. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.